Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most outrageous case someone has asked you to take? I am attorney practicing estate planning, wills and trust, probate. Not a week goes by that I don't hear a story about a family squabbling over an inheritance, but there was one guy in particular. He had an aunt who was a lesbian and had recently married her lifelong partner. His aunt died shortly after they were finally allowed to be legally married. Like many couples, they had a trust together, and as you would imagine, it left everything to the surviving spouse, and only when both of them died was it divided between other friends and relatives. The nephew was left with a fairly generous gift once both his aunt and her wife passed away. Apparently that wasn't good enough for him. He wanted to sue his aunt's widow to get his inheritance that he was entitled to now. I explained that wasn't really possible since the trust was very clear and it wasn't like his aunt left everything to her spouse under duress or anything like that. Also, the spouse had complete authority to change the trust and could theoretically cut him out of the trust entirely if she chose to. There is something that happens when tell people something contrary to what they want to hear. When you give someone advice that conflicts with how they believe the world works, they get upset, flustered and more entrenched in their position. They will ask the same question multiple ways just to try you to tell them the answer they want to hear. You can see this phenomena often on our legal advice. So he kept asking different ways he could sue to get his inheritance, and I kept telling him that he would mostly likely lose the case and then not receive anything ever. Finally, he asked, so what can I do? My actual, legitimate legal advice. You can be really nice to your aunt's wife. He stormed out of my office without saying a word. That was a first for me. His mother was there for the entire meeting and apologized for his behavior, saying he's upset. He was really close to his aunt. Right. It was absolutely clear where he developed his sense of entitlement from. Not a lawyer, but worked in a law firm. Had a potential client who needed to access something on a high shelf when she was at work. Instead of using the step that was provided, she took it upon herself to take her shoes off, then stand on her chair to reach the shelf. She forgot about her own shoes on the way down and tripped over them. She tried to blame her employers. That's not how it works, love. There was another woman using a vacuum cleaner in her own home and she tripped over the lead. When we asked who it was in particular she intended to sue, as there was nothing wrong with the vacuum cleaner and no actual injury. She became confused and confessed she did not know. She just thought she could claim from someone. Pretty tame examples, but amusing at the time. Some people just need saving from themselves. When we asked who it was in particular she intended to sue, as there was nothing wrong with the vacuum cleaner and no actual injury, she became confused and confessed she did not know. She just thought she could claim from someone. This thread is full of crazy, absurd crap, but for some reason this little story killed me. Not lawyer but paralegal. I took a cold call one evening from a gentleman who was clearly high, probably and homeless. He wanted to sue his local police dispatch, 911, paramedics and a hospital. We are a civil litigation firm, because he knocked on someone who was now, allegedly, trying to get him. It was now the police station's fault that he would have to stab the guy, and he repeatedly asked me if he should carry a knife so he could do said stabbing. He apparently had also asked the 911 dispatch this same question, and all they would tell him is that no, he should not in fact go stab someone. Also asked if he should go stab the other guy before he had a chance to get him. He then wanted to come hide at our office while keeping his knife and deciding where to go stab the other guy. Definitely most surreal phone call of my life thus far. And before it's asked, no, we didn't report the situation to anyone. We are in a large city and he said his location was up north. Did not give us his name, and we don't have caller ID. Very old boss. Hates technology because he can't understand it. So we really didn't have anything to give the police as far as useful information. Fun times. Hidden in there, he actually had an interesting legal question regarding self-defense. He knows someone's going to kill him, the police aren't helping, and he wanted to know exactly what proactive steps he could take in the direction of his own self-defense before breaking laws. Too bad he couldn't communicate that question too well. So in my jurisdiction sometimes we get a case and may only have 5 minutes to talk to a client before preliminary hearing. Not an attorney yet, waiting bar results. But at an internship we had a client in criminal court that we defended. He met a woman at a bar. They had a few drinks and went back to her place. They had consensual sex, uncontested by either party. They both fell asleep in their underwear on her bed. The woman called the police the next morning and reported a sexual assault. Why, may you ask? Because in his sleep the man got an erection while spooning her. She claimed she did not consent to this action. The state actually charged the man. I was shadowing a female attorney, and I learned over time that she didn't know much about sex. But she leaned over to me and said, "Dongs get hard in your sleep. Can you control that crap?" I got to get in front of the court and explain how an erection in one's sleep is involuntary and therefore he did not have the intent to rub his erect dong on her. Case was dismissed at preliminary hearing. OMG. Defense by Morningwood. Not a lawyer yet. I'm in my last semester of law school and about to take my last ever law school final today. As a law student you have the option of doing a lot of low-level pro bono work. I was at a family court as part of a project to help abused women get restraining orders against their abusers. To look loyally, all of us law students dressed up in suits. Family court tends to be filled with pro seffiers, people representing themselves. So, anyone dressed in a suit starts attracting all of the people who don't want to deal with the issues themselves, since hey, they look like a lawyer. This one gentleman came up to me and my partner, another law student, asking us if we could help him file a restraining order against his girlfriend because she wrote on her Facebook wall that he had a small penis, which he assured us wasn't true. He also wanted to get a restraining order against a different ex-girlfriend because she took some of his clothes and things when they broke up and he wanted them back. He also wanted to get a restraining order against his brother for beating him up when he was a kid. He was in his 30s. Good luck in your exams, man. A fellow came to me in 1996 and said he was able to stop his grand mal seizures by smoking pot. He was a very difficult, sometimes abusive hothead with a long history of criminal cases. He had no money. He wanted to make pot legal in Canada. Many lawyers had already turned him away. I took it on. Very reluctantly. It was obviously a complete long shot, but I was young and ambitious. George Soros Foundation learned about the challenge, funded the case and provided some experts. A few years later, and too many hours, arguments, tears and sleepless nights to count. Damned if he didn't win. His case became the national template for medical marijuana in Canada. The client wanted full legalization, so he was disappointed with the result. Oh well, I tried. Respect from an epileptic. Grand Miles. Not a lawyer, but my uncle once had a client trying to sue Sears for distributing pornography to minors because he caught his 12-year-old son masturbating to the lingerie section. Probably will be buried, but I defended a guy accused of rape. His defense was that the girl had been a one-night stand who had become obsessed with him and had broken into his house, found a used condom in the bin that he had ejaculated into and stole it, and had then smeared semen all over herself, punched herself in the face and had thrown herself into a bush on purpose before going to a hospital. She was doing this to get back at him for not wanting to be with her. I explained that a jury might not believe this, but that I would put the case if he wanted to. He was duly convicted. Lawyer and dog enthusiast here. During law school I had the opportunity to work under a special license for the public defender in my city. Like in most cities, they were grossly understaffed and overworked, so I had the potential as a 2L to do an actual misdemeanor trial. The client that I had to accept was a woman who killed 2 puppies by neglect. She left them in a cage outside in February with no food or water for weeks until they perished. Then she called animal control to get them. I couldn't look at this person without feeling utter disgust. It did not help that she had a mustache and a dead tooth. When I asked her why she waited so long to call animal control, thinking that she should have called before they were dead so they could have been saved, she replied, "I don't like dogs." I had to defend this woman as the first person I ever legally represented. She took a decent plea. When it was concluded, she thanked me and tried to shake my hand. I just gave her a look and left. Criminal prosecutor here. A patrol officer pulled over a driver for some traffic violation. I think failure to signal. After a heated roadside exchange where the driver initially refused to turn over her license, she ultimately relented and thrust the license with undue force into the officer's outstretched hand. The cop charged her with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. When asked to justify his actions, he stated that people need to learn to respect the police. We dismissed the charge, apologized to the defendant, and told the cop to never bring us something like that again. I can't recall if Internal Affairs was notified. I work with the police every day, and the majority of them are good people. This guy was a crap. Thank you for making the responsible choice. Many of the prosecutors I've worked with would have laughed and let the charges stand. My brother, fresh out of law school, was asked to defend the fraternity being sued for defecating in the dorm room of the pledge who did not finish his bid to be a brother. He called the co-defendants and the plaintiff the poopers and the poopy respectively in our group text. If you're hazing someone, you're in butthole. If you're hazing someone who isn't even part of your organization anymore, you're straight up stupid. Used to work in matrimonial law, which is the worst practice area of them all. You see fairly reasonably good people reduced to the worst of themselves in every aspect. They're emotionally distraught, seeking vengeance, wounded pride, etc. etc. Aside from the woman who really wanted in her motion for full custody papers the fact that her husband allegedly jerked off constantly leaving the couch sticky, left the door open while he did so. They had 5 kids, 1 in her teens and 4 around age 8. They were quadruplets, and left his used tissues everywhere, so she frequently sat in them. There was the septuagenarian who came in because his stripper wife. Wait, let's back up. The guy is an executive at a big company in NYC. He was faithful, supposedly, to his first wife of 40 years, cared for her through sickness and then her death, had a grown son, became addicted to strip clubs. He spent something like $20k a month at them, and then met a stripper that he eventually impregnated then married, with prenup. She had 2 kids with him. He reduced his strip club spending to $50k a year. Apparently she suspected him of being unfaithful with another stripper, so she filed for divorce. She claimed he was an unfit parent. He claimed the same. The guy was not attractive, though he kept himself well groomed, was trim, dressed reasonably well, just had a bland appearance. He was also in his 70s. I don't understand. Maybe he was just a dollar sign to the strippers. In any case, one day while discussing his prenup, we had to ask, did you cheat on her because that would nullify the prenup? No. Common name. Come on. We need to know all the information before we can proceed. I didn't have sex with the other stripper. Lucky for you. Oral sex does not constitute sex in the state of New York. My boss was a genius. I had to keep it together or I'd have laughed in the guy's face. BTW, his wife wanted to break the prenup, which afforded her $7.10k a month for childcare needs alone, and make him pay upwards of $25k a month. Absolutely ridiculous. Glad to be out of that crappy practice area. I'm not a lawyer, but as a child I was taken into foster care and then returned to my father's custody, so he had custody of me from ages 4-16. When I was 22 he tried to sue me for the costs involved in caring for me for that time, saying that he had no obligation to take custody of me and had only done so to save me from foster care. It was obviously dismissed and I don't talk to him anymore. That's seriously messed up on his part. Criminal defense social worker at a legal aid organization. I had a client who ran 3 red lights on a very busy street, knocked over a police officer, drove up on the sidewalk, forcing people to jump out of the way, and was finally dragged out of his car in a parking lot. He wanted us to refer him to a civil attorney to sue the city because an officer was too rough with him during his arrest. I mean, I get it. They were probably rough with him. Police brutality in my city is real, but good luck with that lawsuit. My abusive father took legal action against me for taking my things with me when I finally moved out of his house and on my own, claiming that he was the rightful owner of my clothes, school supplies, etc. Obviously the judge dismissed the case in about 30 seconds. We don't talk much anymore. Not a story from me but from my stepmother. Once, she was asked to and took a case involving alleged workplace racism, where an African American woman was offended by a man making a joke about African and European swallows, in response to someone's question about swallows. According to her, she literally had to buy and play clips from a VHS copy of Monty Python and the Holy Grail in court to show the woman that it wasn't racism, just a Monty Python reference. Luckily, the guy she accused won, and our family got to keep the VHS tape. According to her, She literally had to buy and play clips from a VHS copy of Monty Python and the Holy Grail in court to show the woman that it wasn't racism, just a Monty Python reference. That would be it for me. Hang up the lawyer in hat and just retire. It would never get better than playing Monty Python in court as a legitimate legal defense. Lawyer here. Breakup. They were not married. Client let his ex live in his house with her new boyfriend until her child, not my client's child, school year ends. Very reasonable and understanding as heck. All in child's interest. Client was rich and bought and paid for everything. Finally they move out. When we arrived there was nothing to see. She dug up half the 3-meter high spruce hedge with her boyfriend. Half is hers, she said. They planted them together. They probably burned it because we found some branches in the barrel behind the house, where there has clearly been burned something. House was cleaned out. They took even the spoons and carpets. 3 years already is this going on and I'm fighting over a freaking toilet brush and worthless carpets in court, which is in the list among 300 other items. Last time there were curtains and a boat carrier. I hate family law. Client just has a matter of principle. Had a woman call wanting to sue DreamWorks because her grandson watched the Bee Movie. Thought bees were his friends and ended up with a bunch of bee stings. Had a guy call wanting to sue his ex-girlfriend for pain and suffering. I explained to him that we were a personal injury firm and could not take his case since he was not injured. He countered with a broken heart as an injury. I'm late to the game. Lawyer. Once had a gentleman come to my office with an interest in suing his former employer. My office is general civil litigation, and I handle our employment matters. As an aside to that, he also specifically asked for a female attorney for reasons not related to this story. I met with him for about half an hour. He explained that he had been terminated from his employment and believed it to be gender biased. In my jurisdiction, an employer needs to show a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for discharge, and while this hurdle can be overcome, it's a high one. I asked him if he had ever been disciplined, cited, or written up in the past, to establish if the employer would be able to say he was an unfit worker, if he had an unblemished record. Our job is easier. He said yes, 12 times, in 2 years. I finished the interview, thanked him for his interest in our business, but told him we would not be able to take the case. I sent him off with a few referral numbers, but I don't know if he ever found someone to take his case. I'm going to guess he was cited for sexual harassment 12 times in 2 years. Not a lawyer but a family friend is. She had someone come to her asking to sue Starbucks because someone spilled their latte or smoothie or whatever on the sidewalk and she slipped on it and hit her head. She claimed Starbucks was at fault because it wouldn't have happened if Starbucks didn't put extra slippery whipped cream in the drink. Not me, but my uncle takes weird injury cases. One involved a guy who sat down in a public toilet and the chemical they had just used to clean the seat gave him chemical burns on his butt and thighs. I have had several, but the best was a custody divorce about 5 years ago. This guy was a super smart engineer, but he fell for a woman who was just white trash. He married her and at the time of the divorce, they had 2 kids aged 6 and 4. One day she told him she wanted a divorce and wanted him to move out. It was a huge house in a gated community, so I advised him to move to another part of the house so he could be near his kids. I also told him that the reason she wanted him out of the house was so that she could have the man she was cheating on him with move in. He did not believe she was cheating, so I told him to go to the gate and check the logs. Sure enough, my client left every morning at 6:30 am for work, and around 7:30 am 3 to 5 times a week, another man would check in at the gate and say he was headed to my client's house. I dug into the name and it was my client's wife's ex-boyfriend, who was fresh off an 8-year stint in prison for sexual assault and attempted murder. Part of his parole was having to register as a sex offender. My client confronted his wife and recorded her response. One-party consent state. She basically admitted to cheating, admitted to her lover being a sex offender, then told my client she wanted to move her lover in, and if my client did not move out, she would make their children's lives miserable and make sure they know it is because daddy is being selfish. She lawyered up after that and we played the tape for her attorney in the first conference. He made some noise about consent and it not sounding like her, but he knew her allowing a registered sex offender around her kids was damning. In the end, he got the house, full custody, and the bank accounts. She got one car, her clothes and jewelry which were very valuable, some of the household items, and $25,000 cash. She literally moved from a palatial home in a gated neighborhood in the nicest part of town into a trailer in an unincorporated part of the county. Don't marry trash. Also, think twice about who you are having children with. My dad's story. As a previous lawyer in California, this husband and wife were getting a divorce. Everything went normal except the husband requested partial custody. This was fine except for the fact that they had no children. No, the husband wanted partial custody of the dog. The jurisdiction is that pets are personal property, so this couldn't be arranged in the first place. But my dad had to wonder why the heck this guy wanted partial custody of a pet. So why do you want partial custody? Does the pet mean that much to you? No, it's that we both like the dog, so she'll have custody and like it, but when I get custody, I'm gonna take it to the vet and have it put down. That's 101 on what you don't say to your defense lawyer. Interned at a law office. Client came in to consult with my boss. They owned a horse farm in the country and their sister had ridden one of the horses off the farm into swampy boggish territory off the beaten path. The client was dead set on suing the sister for decreasing the value of her horse and wanted to sue her for $500 of damaged goods. My boss just kind of sat there and stared at her. Being the good guy he is, he told her, "Miss, it's going to cost you more than $500 in legal fees. You'll be better off doing this in small claims court. But I wouldn't recommend that either as the judge will likely throw out the case." The client was vehement in suing her sister in court with an attorney to teach her a lesson that she can't just ride off on other people's horses without permission. Boss told her there was no way in good faith that he could assist with this lawsuit. Detective here, not a lawyer, but once had a man want me to charge his wife's lover with sexual assault because she was mentally coerced into having an affair. I told him that Jedi mind tricks don't meet elements of the offense. He filed a complaint against me which was unfounded. In NC they have something called alienation of affection and you can sue someone who has an affair with your spouse. A friend of mine got a pretty hefty sum from some schmuck that slept with his wife. I once worked as a prosecutor on the misdemeanor docket and heard some really amazing defenses that, if the defendant had an attorney, would not have made. My favorite was this guy charged with speeding who gave what I call the $5 footlong defense. He pled guilty but wanted to provide an explanation to the judge that he had just eaten a $5 roast beef footlong from Subway and was speeding to get home before he fell asleep because roast beef is sedating. The judge chuckled and asked if he meant to say turkey, a lunch meat that might cause some form of mild sedation. The man realized his mistake and said that the $5 footlong contained both. I am trying not to burst out laughing as he used the word $5 footlong about a half dozen times by this point like he was actively advertising for Subway. The judge said he didn't think there was such a $5 footlong available at Subway. At this point, the entire courtroom was laughing. The judge told him to choose his food more carefully and slow down along with giving him the maximum fine. Not a lawyer, but I worked at a law office and sat in on some meetings to take notes. We had a guy come in, it was his case evaluation and my boss, the lawyer, asked what he wanted to do. He said sue Lake. He mentioned a specific lake but I can't remember which one. I did my best to keep a straight face and my boss asked why he wanted to sue the lake. He said that it ate his boat. We asked if he meant it sunk. He said that no, it didn't, it ate it. The boat was gone one day and he checked the video and the video showed the water level of the lake rise almost 4 inches and fall again, which caused the boat to break loose off the dock and sink. He showed us the video and sure enough, here is this little 4-person John boat with a motor and exactly that happened. My boss said that she'd take the case but thought it couldn't guarantee how well it would do in court. She then asked if he knew who the owner was. He was the owner. Besides, he just wanted to sue the lake, not the owner. When my boss said she'd need some money to process the paperwork, he threw down a brick of cash. I was a paralegal at a big personal injury firm for several years right after college. 2 unusual stories. Letter from a man in jail. Firms that advertise on TV get many of these. He wanted to sue Oprah, the Oprah, because she was a witch and she had put a curse on his body. This curse caused pain in his eyes, liver, and testicles. This was like a 6-page letter. Man called wanting to sue Burger King because he and his mother got sick after eating 50 burgers over the course of a weekend. He said they routinely bought a lot of burgers and would freeze them to eat throughout the week. Yes, freeze whole cooked burgers, buns and condiments and all. Of course they both got sick and couldn't leave the house out of fear of going in my pants. The thing is, BK Corporate had already refunded them for the cost of the food when they complained. He wanted more compensation for their terrible experience, and he wanted them to pay for his taxi fare. Yep, they took a taxi to Burger King and made the taxi wait while 50 burgers were prepared. We didn't take either case. A year out of law school, I once had a potential client who wanted me to sue Canada. Apparently he could not get into the country due to his felony record. I tried to reason with him that it was up to the sovereign nation to set its own rules regarding entry to the country, but he insisted that we could make a lot of money suing Canada. I didn't take the case, but I told him I might be able to get him a letter that said sorry from Canada. This reminds me of Better Call Saul, when that crazy dude wanted to sue the government to make his ranch a sovereign state, or something like that. Saul wanted to take the case because of how many hours he could bill. He needed cash, but then the guy tried to pay him in his own currency he created for his new sovereign state, saying it would be worth billions once they won their case. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.